but especially today because we have Kevin Ayers with us. You
Hi
might
there, hi Don.
Well, great to have you, Kevin. Kevin's just a phenomenal individual and a really significant professional, especially in his own field. Chat's wide open. We depend on chat to make us as relevant as we can, give you as many thoughtful and worthwhile takeaways that you can actually apply. Today, the focus is on live streaming and video, of which Kevin's just a master, and I'll let him share a little bit with you. So feel free to start chatting. And with that said, Kevin, welcome to the event today. And I'd love to hear a little bit about yourself so the audience can get to know you a little bit better and initial thoughts on live streaming and video.
Well, look, firstly, thank you so much for having me on the show today. It's a real privilege. I know you are the master of this in terms of consistency, and I think that's a really big word, I think, when it comes to video and live streaming, and maybe something we can come back to. I've live streamed on 3 continents, done a lot of live streaming for IBM. I'm probably more used to being the guy behind the camera pressing the buttons. I even ran if you've come across Second Life and sort of virtual worlds and that sort of thing, I even ran a live chat show in Second Life where I was not only the host, but I was the guy controlling the virtual camera positions and so on. So that is like a real brain ache trying to do that. So I've done all kinds of things to do with live streaming. As I said, I did a lot of stuff with IBM. I had a few patents, multimedia patents there. So I love innovating with video and multimedia. Again, something perhaps we could come back to. Now, very much in the franchising sector. Work with a lot of franchise companies to create video content, often remote video content. So kind of this sort of situation, either podcast or remote capture. We also do remote headshots, things like that, mini brand shoots, that sort of thing. So all kind of innovative ways of using video. But I think the key thing for me is that video is just a tool, right? It's not, a lot of people, I'm not like a video person. I don't really geek out on cameras and all that. Don't get me wrong, I do like tech, but for me, it's all about the content, the message. That's far more important than, whether you've used this light or that camera. There's no point in having all of that stuff if you haven't got good content. So there's a little bit sort of potted kind of where I'm at and sort of what came into the top of my head is for the intro. So.
Well, that's fantastic. And, I've visited your profile. Hope everybody in the audience who sees this and who sees this in the future will check you out. And I saw that, you have headshots as a specialty. And since you're focusing on the franchise industry, why is that? What distinguishes the franchise industry from other industries that might be able to use your services?
The thing about franchising, the whole point of franchising is you've got lots of individual businesses, but they all kind of come under an umbrella brand and they're all geographically dispersed. So when it comes to things like headshots, capturing video, that sort of thing, the franchisor is very keen for all of the franchisees to be on brand. That's quite difficult, and it's kind of a bit of a faff. It's a bit of a hassle to go and get local photographers in each of the locations, and then you've got to explain to them what the brand guidelines are, et cetera, et cetera. You've got multiple suppliers in effect. So we solve that problem. So because we take it remotely, literally, I'm talking to a gym chain that has 1,000 gyms around the world. So let's say they each wanted a headshot of their manager. That's 1,000 different photographers they'd have to deal with, or they can just deal with us and we'll do it the same every time. So it's a really, really neat solution for geographically dispersed teams, effectively, whether that's franchises. The other key kind of industry vertical are professional services. So solicitors or lawyers in US speak, the accountants, architects, people like that, but multi-site firms where, again, the people are the product. So it's really important that they have a professional, smiley, friendly image of their staff, but that is the same and it's on brand everywhere. Often you go to these sites and they've got missing, they've got senior partners, but they haven't got a photo because they just came on board, right? And they maybe wanted to build them out straight away and put them in bid documents and this kind of thing. They haven't got a headshot. And we just become part of the onboarding process. So they come aboard, they get the laptop, do the health and safety, get the headshot, job done.
Okay, well, I could see where that could help visibility, but also there's a communication strategy that could be attached to it because, how do you talk to a lot of people in a short period of time? And that's where I believe live streaming comes in, is you can,
Absolutely.
if you had 50 franchisors or franchisees, it'd be easy to have a specific call every other week or once a month or whatever to get together with everybody for knowledge share, getting acquainted, breaking down some mysteries or barriers or even competition between the group. Because if you want to create a win-win-win situation, there has to be a platform. And before, there wasn't exactly anything like live streaming. And I believe it also lends itself to recognition. So if you got a great franchisee doing something terrific, well, it'd be great to offer them an award or something, or have a contest or whatever. I think the key is, how do you get more involvement? How do you get more interaction? How do you
I absolutely agree. And I think that communication thing, it's so easy to, even if there's a few hours delay, you talk to these people and then you talk to those people, and these people feel disadvantaged, or they feel that you were favoring these people. You hear that all, I come from a corporate background, and that you have to be really, really careful about that. And live streaming, like you say, once you get over, like for a small number, it's probably easier to do it on Zoom or something. But once you start getting to larger numbers, that's not really feasible. And it does become a bit more a one-way with a Q&A, which lends itself very well to exactly this sort of situation. And like you say, you can have other people, say somebody wins an award, get them on the live stream, make a fuss about them. I totally agree. I think it's an excellent medium.
Yeah, and I do too. And that's why I'm so entirely focused on it, because everybody has a brand personally or professionally. How do you keep polishing that brand without a gatekeeper, without someone saying, come on my show? Well, that's great, but how consistent is that? And how many shows truly align with what you're doing, not just broadcasting? And I think even franchisees could have their own shows, right? To include service providers or great customers, right? Or great people who are working there. And then it also allows the CEO or founder to really able to message directly from that person, to talk about this year's goals, last year's financials, whatever it is. People get comfortable with people they see. And now with AI and everything else that's really can manipulate things, the only real thing you could trust is real people in real time having real conversations, because it's happening.
That's something I talk a lot about, Don, actually, that I think this year, I mean, last year this was a big deal, but I think this year, even people who'd not really heard of AI and didn't kind of catch up on ChatGPT last year, right? I think you'd have had to been under a rock to not heard something about AI and the words ChatGPT, even if you haven't played with it. And you and I know it's far more than ChatGPT now, but it's going to affect a lot of different things. And I think the two words trust and authenticity are going to become bigger and bigger and bigger topics. And I agree. Like you could conceivably do a webinar using AI, but why would you? It'd almost be too hard to do it. It's just easier to do it this way, and it's completely authentic. You can't talk for an hour or half an hour without kind of getting authentic, because you just get under the skin of people. People can fake it for 5 minutes, but they can't fake it for a half an hour to an hour. Especially things like passion. Right, you can see I'm getting excited, right? That's quite hard to fake when you're passionate about something for more than 5 minutes. So yeah, I think I think this medium and video in general, and especially things like remote video, podcasting, live streaming, all of these very sort of relatively low production value, but high content value. I think those sort of mediums are going to be in an era where trust is becoming more and more of a premium. I think it's going to become vital.
Oh, it's going to be everything because there's going to be such a lack of it. And, getting people who are aligned and getting them offline has always been the key to LinkedIn, right? So you go in, meet somebody, hopefully have a Zoom and maybe build some sort of relationship. On live streaming, you could take a whole community off of the posting, commenting, wink, wink, nod, nod approach.
Yeah.
Get them off to themselves and get away from the static and the noise and the spammers, and really get a chance to meet, greet, get to know each other, and go from an audience to a community, right?
Yeah.
Once you got a community, then it actually could turn into a family, right? So it extends even one more step, and all you need is a few quality people working together, sharing, knowledge sharing, collaborating, because what's interesting is there's 1 billion people registered on LinkedIn. I go through this all the time. Only 18% in a week do anything, comment, like. Only 1 to 2% create
I'm
content.
surprised it's that high, actually, to be honest.
Yeah, but only 1 or 2% create the content.
Yeah.
And then from there, depending on the quality of the content, the consistency, the direction, it really narrows down to just a few really good people doing the right thing over time. But when you get to live streaming, and I think that's a distinction, because I couldn't have done 500 days in a row if I had to plan for it, if I had homework after it, if I had to edit it, if I had to produce it. And right, the beauty is you hit the lever, it's you with someone else, pick a topic, and you kind of become a workout buddy for the other person, right? So, helping them get better, learning from them. And then what the audience sees, which they care about most, is who are you, not what do you do? Because what do you do never comes into the equation if they don't see you. I'll give you a good example. You might know Ford Sykes. He's heavily into franchising. Great guy. If you don't, he's been on Harvey's show.
I haven't. No, I'll have to look him up.
Oh, okay. He's actually coming back for, I think, the 3rd time, week from Monday.
Is he in the US?
Yes, he's in the US.
I'm mainly networked in the UK. I'm gradually just starting to build my network in the US, but it's very early days. So.
Oh, well, this is, definitely Ford, somebody you want to talk to. He gets 25K plus every speaking engagement. He's booked out. He's written 7 books. He's got his own podcast. I was on his show a couple weeks ago, and just extraordinary. His technical production value is really high. And what was fascinating about him is that I had him on a show with another gentleman who's in my group and has his own show every week. And he was introducing his 2nd book. And Ford spent almost all of his time supporting, promoting the other individual.
Right.
Which could have been, it was his time as well as anybody else's. But here's what he understood. He looks so much better helping someone in front of people get better than if he would have said, here's my last book. What's he going to sell, a book or two? He doesn't need the superficial, or he doesn't need more connections. He needs more relevance. And there's another gentleman, Todd DeWitt, amazing guy, retired at 42 as a college dean. And on the way out, LinkedIn Learning got hold of him, and now he's created 44 courses that are up for sale, and he's got it worked out where he just had to do the course and everything else takes care of itself through other people.
Nice.
But by association, your circle of influence increases by the association and the people you hang around, but also who you show up with, right? So if Ford's on the show, Ford's, let's say, community will say, hey, Kevin and Ford together, Kevin, Don and Ford together, everybody raises their presence
Yeah.
that way.
And I've actually, it isn't so much live streaming, but it's podcasting, which is one step away. Obviously, it's similar, but not the same. I think when we spoke earlier in the week, I was saying about both my daughters have podcasts, and I've encouraged them to create podcasts. And I said, like, when you start, like, you won't get very big people on, because who are you? And in a way, it doesn't matter, because you're just finding your feet, right? But at each sort of more senior person you get, or well-known person, it makes it easier to get the next one. And my younger daughter has a podcast around musical theatre, because she wants to be in musical theatre. She's just had quite a well-known West End star on her show. So now it's going to be easier for when she says to the next person, "Hey, would you like to be on my podcast? Check out my episode with Kerry Ellis, who's had a album out with Brian May and has appeared in Broadway and the West End, etc." She just has that credibility that she can get somebody like that. And similarly, my elder daughter has just reached over 100 episodes now of her podcast. She hasn't even been to university, and has built this incredible network on LinkedIn. I mean, to be honest, she's literally my inspiration, because I'm not that consistent. It's cobbler's children for me. It's so easy to say, create video, do this, do that, but I'm too busy creating everybody else's videos. I don't get around to doing my own enough, of course, right? So she's had over 100 episodes. She is seriously well networked in the health tech space, in the UK at least. She's getting invites to go, Google HQ and the conference in Malta last year, and London, etc. She hasn't even been to university yet, right? So, it just blows my mind what you can achieve. And what I've always said is, if you can build your network, if you don't build a network, that's fine. You can go and queue up like everybody else to get a job. There's nothing wrong with that, but let's be clear. That is quite hard work at that point, right? And it's not easy, and you won't necessarily get a good one. Or you can create a network, and you'll find that people start opening doors. In fact, they start creating doors that weren't even there. So we went to Malta, drops into the conversation. She's looking for a podcast sponsor. And this lady said, from a great company called Podimos, give them a quick shout out, said, well, I love what you're doing. I'd like to sponsor you. She hadn't gone to Malta looking for a young person's podcast to sponsor, but these opportunities open up. So if you get people on your podcast, on your regular live stream show, and you gradually build up and get that credibility, build that network, build that family, it's kind of incredible what can happen. Just sort of, you get these sort of serendipitous conversations that happen, and you build that credibility.
You make so many great points, and a few of them I'd like to address.
Go for it.
Is if I talked about Todd, I talked about Ford. What changed so much is I had Bob Burg on the show. And for people who aren't familiar with Bob Burg, he created the Go Giver book and then a whole foundation around it. And it became among the top 10 most popular business books ever written. Wow. So he's up there with Think and Grow Rich and everything else. We had a great conversation. And once I put Bob Burke's live stream up on, prior events or whatever that category on LinkedIn, when I said to Ford, I live 40 miles up the road from Bob. I'm great friends with him. If it's good enough for Bob, it's good enough for me. Todd, thing. So once you can catch a rising star, and it's all about leverage, right? It's not, and it's actually getting better exposure for Bob, because he's going to be on the front page of my profile with our story. I'm using him on the show right now to get his exposure out there. So it's all, how do you repurpose? How do you get synergies? How do you take more than the cream off the top? And that's how you start to mine this thing in the proper way. The other thing is live streaming helps the person doing live stream, because they need practice, right? And until, I look at, the show, and actually we get so many people who watch it after the show, it's like a buffing wheel. When you lean into it, it polishes you. I mean, it's just like a comic who would go into a bunch of improvs or comedy clubs just to get his act right, and then go to Broadway or somewhere.
Well, and again, coming back to my daughters, that's what I said to them. I said, I literally cannot think of a downside of doing that, because what are they doing? They're getting used to speaking to adults. They're getting confidence. They're getting, especially for my younger daughter, they're getting presentation skills, and potentially positioning themselves as a TV presenter or something. So there's just no downside to it. Building a network. In fact, my elder daughter, her tutor said to her, like, why are you applying to that university? If you apply to this university, it's more prestigious. But they didn't have the course she wanted to do. And she was polite. She didn't say this, but she's thinking, like, you don't get it. I've probably already met my future employer, or maybe not my future employer, my future business partner, right? Because, she's met all these incredible people, and they know who she is. She went out to Malta. I think the two times, there's a few times it sunk in. She was in this group of people. Two of them are like final year medical students who are well known in the space. They've been on like billboards in Piccadilly Circus for Gap, equivalent to Times Square in New York. There was a guy who is like probably the most networked person in health tech anywhere, at least certainly the UK. There's the guy who's head of Philips Healthcare, and like Philips, the light bulbs and medical devices and all the rest of it, right? And her, and she's like, I can't even believe I'm standing with this group of people. And then somebody else joined the group, and they went round and shook hands and kind of introduced themselves. And then when they got to Imogen, they said, "And you're Imogen." And she was the only person in that select group of people that he'd heard of. She's like, "Oh my goodness, this is crazy." So it is incredible, with that being consistent and building that trust and credibility, what you can achieve. Like I say, she was only 17 at the time. She hasn't even gone to university yet. But so for young people, especially, or anyone trying to get into a new field, I think this is an absolutely amazing strategy.
I totally agree. With that, I want to bring Penny's comment to the surface.
Hey, Penny.
Penny's just a great lady. She's she's heavily involved in writing manuals. That's her forte. She's focused on franchising too. I had the pleasure of talking with her a couple times on Zoom. Had her on the show with Harvey, who, if you take Harvey's situation, he came on the show just as a audience member about 9 months ago. And if someone's in the audience a day or two in a row, I'll reach out and let's have a Zoom just to get some feedback and whatever. And the next day I said he came on as a host, and he had never done a live stream. He said when I asked him, he thought it'd be 2 or 3 weeks from then instead of the next day, and he didn't have time to prepare. But
threw him in the deep end.
Yeah, but when you're doing conversation, right, and it's all positive, has some civility, respect, that's what people want to see, because there's so little of it. So within like 3 or 4 months, he was doing every other Friday, every other Sunday with me, and introducing him to so many people. And then he decided he was ready for the franchise show, which he launched about 4 months ago, which has been
which is going great guns.
Oh, it's unbelievable. And it's because of how he's been able to learn, change, adapt. But what's interesting is doing a live stream without an audience is not doing much of a live stream. But if you can form a community from someone else's live stream, right? If you're here for 2 or 3 months, everybody who's here gets to know you. When you do your own show, they jump on with you because it's not competition. It's a different area,
right,
a different personality. And now he's launching a second show with Simon Wise, I guess, that's going to be taking place on Thursdays. So it's kind of like a franchisee did really good with one location. Let's add another one. And, I'm talking with Penny and Harvey to see how we can collaborate together and elevate people and leverage what someone's already built. Now, back to your daughter, which I think your pride and joy is demonstrated by how you share the stories, is if you look at the average worker or employee, take 30, 40, 50-year-old person, at a certain point, their whole goal is to be independent. right? I'd love to have my own thing, and maybe that's why franchising works for so many. I'm tired of the boss. I'm tired of having a ceiling, whatever that is financially or progressively in a more successful role. So why wouldn't someone start out trying to be independent when they don't have all the responsibilities of a 40-year-old, when they don't have to work for money?
Exactly. And and being able to do it now, when they're so young. So I mean, they didn't get it at first. I totally borrowed this from a friend of mine who runs his own business, very successful, and he said, "I just interview people I want to do business with, right?" And so I said to my younger daughter, "You could start a podcast. You could invite actors, casting directors, etc." So guess what? Now you're following them. They've met you, and so when they're casting, that you're not an unknown quantity. You've literally spent half an hour with them, maybe 45 minutes. They've got to know you a little bit, know that you're fun and confident, and they could rely on you, right? So, and then I said to my eldest daughter, she's like, "Well, why would I do it? I want to be a doctor. How on earth starting a podcast get me into university or help me become a doctor?" I said, "Well, you could go and interview all of the admissions tutors for all the universities you want to get into, right? You could interview doctors, medical students, like how do you get in, like what's the best tactics, what's it like being a medical student, etc." And having done that, actually, she found she didn't want to become a doctor because she met so many doctors who said, like, the UK health system's broken, it's not what it was, etc., etc. I wouldn't, to be honest, I wouldn't do it. And she went, "All right, I'm not," and she posted on LinkedIn, and that I'm not going to become a doctor, and that post got over 90,000 views, which anybody who's into their LinkedIn stats will tell you, and I'm sure right? That's a lot on LinkedIn. Like TikTok, maybe not, but on LinkedIn, that's massive. So for a 17-year-old who's only been on the platform less than a year to get that sort of stats just shows, what can be achieved. And she's, keep going through another 3 years of university. By the time she leaves, she's going to be super well networked.
Well, and everything can be an either and, not an either or, right?
Yeah.
You can go to college and still do your podcast. You can still,
oh, absolutely, yeah.
And in time, my two kids, my son became, went to University of Nevada, Las Vegas, became an academic All-American, graduated with. My daughter went for about 2 years. And I was never a big fan of university. I've been there, so it wasn't like sour grapes, but it's so legacy. The stuff they're teaching you, they don't teach you live streaming. They don't teach you LinkedIn. They don't teach you any of that. They teach what they've been teaching with some modification. So, there's a saying, a formal education will make you a living. A self-education will make you a fortune, right?
Yes, yeah.
And because you don't have any limits but your potential. The other thing it does, breaks down limitations.
Sounds like a Jim Rohn quote, I think.
Well, I actually got to know Jim really well in the 90s.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, I was involved with this group called the People's Network. I won't go too much into detail, but when satellite dishes first came out, it allowed people to receive channels they couldn't have done through their local TV. And this was a channel of 24/7 personal improvement.
Right, yeah.
Brian Tracy, every Agmandino, you name it, they were on. And then every 2-3 months, we'd meet in Dallas and they'd show up, right? So for 3 days, all the regular speakers, you get to meet them in person and see them. And, that was a big step forward. And actually what I did with my kids, I had 160 channels with the satellite. I got it down to 5, which was Animal Planet, Food Network, this show, and History or something. So it had no network, no nothing. Right. And they thrived on it. Nito Cobain was another one. And my son loved him. And he said, that's Speedo Nito. And Connie Podesta was another one. So to make a long story short, getting back to limitations, it doesn't matter anymore how old you are. If you're 17 or 70, you're only as valuable as the last thing you just said, right? And if the last thing you just said has value and got attention, you get the right to say something more. And not having to deal with mobility issues, having to go into an office every day, having to jump on a plane, makes it so easy and comfortable. What I find fascinating and what creates a big opportunity is 82% of the people on LinkedIn are between 18 and 34. Only 2.2% of people are over 55. Now,
Really?
yeah, so if you're talking to who you think you are to them, they're not there. So if you're not talking either 18 to 34 language, or you're starting to embrace what's funny about my show and my shows, 95% are over 55. So that's saying birds of a feather flock together.
Yeah.
But there's a huge opportunity for these experienced people who I think consciously think, hey, LinkedIn's just a job board, right? Like it used to be. So I'm not looking for a job at this point in my life. But if they understood there's mentorship opportunities, there's thought leader opportunities. People have created so much content. Why not have a platform, even if you're not looking to monetize it, just to stay relevant, just to share what you've already paid for and done, and find like-minded people? Because another thing, as you get older, you do more subtracting than adding, right?
Yeah.
When you can now say, hey, I can't build more blood relatives, but I can sure build some people who are right where I'm at or where I want to go, reach out. And it really becomes down to what Bob Berg does. Thank you, Penny, for mentioning him. As it's kind of a coincidental that he would be your expert, not that he doesn't deserve to, but people of the same ilk tend to circulate around people of the same.
I'm getting to know Penny better and better, and like finding out more and more. There's a lot to Penny. She's lovely, and even a quick conversation, you realize how experienced she is and how many interesting things she's done. But like almost every week, somebody keeps mentioning her, and I'm like, really? She's done that, and she knows this person, and I'm like, oh my goodness, So yeah, there's a lot to Penny.
Well, and getting back to Harvey even, and he told me a funny story. I guess they had a franchise expo in London a few weeks ago. And a year ago, he bought a ticket or whatever, got admission. He just walked the show. He said this time within 15 minutes, 7, 8 people, different people said, hey, there's the franchise show guy, right? They didn't, with the hat, right? They didn't know Harvey's name. They didn't know Harvey's background, but
Did Harvey get the hat idea from you? That's the question.
Yeah, he never wore a hat either, but I never.
I need to get a hat. I need a hat.
Well, that's what happens. It starts to spread.
How's that?
Yeah, for sure. It matches. But that's the point. There is an element of art and science. There's a theater to this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how much fun you want to have with it, with yourself, with the audience, because the more humble, the more modest you are, the more easy it is to accept you and be accessible. And I think too many people want to be a big shot, or they've had so little time on stage that when they get it, it has to be jam it all in, and it just goes over people's heads, and people say, you just don't know any better, versus, hey, you drop your water. It happens. It's live. There's no way around it. And people feel comfortable when they feel comfortable with comfortable people. And I think that's the nuances you pick up, is what makes for a great show. And a great show is making the other person better for being part of it, and the audience better for getting to know someone new. And then, like I say, Penny came from Harvey. I know you were on Harvey's show. I work with Harvey.
You asked me when was the last time I went live, actually, before we went live. Probably the last time I went live was helping Penny launch her book, actually. So I kind of, I was kind of the host, if you like, for Penny, so that her foil, if you like, so I'd ask her questions about her book launch. So.
Well, the thing is everything comes around, goes around, right? You help somebody, maybe they can't help you, but they got, you bring me a cake when you come visit me, I'm going to have to be thinking when I come visit you, I got to bring you something, a cake.
I've got a. Nobody mentioned cake. You didn't say I had to bring cake, though.
No, but the thing is,
I know.
you got to look at how people look at you, and everything is incremental, right? If you do this a little bit better, you'll get a little better result. If you do this better over time, it compounds. And after a while, you do it just because you enjoy the person you're with. And if I'm working with people, I could never afford to pay them their hourly rate, right? But if you put them on a show, they'll be here for 30 hours a year, and they'll give everything they have. And you know what? When we talk about like your daughter being young and doing this, if she's doing it, she's so far ahead of the people who are still doing what they used to do.
Yeah.
Right? So she's actually a leader in that area because she's out front doing it, where other people are still working conferences, still working speakers. I mean, we talked about if you ask an employee, boy, if I could get free, I'd love to leave here and do something on my own. When you ask people who have done traditional things very successfully, like speaking, courses, all that stuff, they hate the road after a while. They hate, they're making a lot of money. I don't see my family 4 days out of the week, right? Or I'm missing a ball game. I'm missing this for this, where if they could create something where they can consolidate, aggregate 40, 50 people in a specific time frame, but also being aligned and relevant. Because my first shows, I would just go in for numbers. I didn't know any better. Just figure more is better. I was getting up to 350 comments a show, which is every 10 seconds. 90% of people are just there to have a party.
Yeah.
Right? Just to be seen and be seen. And hey, Jim, hey, Joe, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, I look at it like a boutique. If you had a board meeting with 8 or 9 people, who would you want around the table with you to really have a serious discussion? And is there an upside? Is there a future? If you do all this right, is there a possibility? If you don't consider the end result at the beginning, you're just a feather in the wind. Maybe you'll get somewhere, maybe you won't. Penny, who's taken over comments today. Thank you, Penny. Couldn't have done that pre-launch of Manual Magic without you, Kevin. You were the difference between success and failure. Isn't that great?
No, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, and that's what people like, is thoughtful people, giving people credit who deserve it, where it's not just false promotion or, like I say, wink, wink, nod, nod, because it's all reputation, and reputation is all based on trust. And it's based on people coming through when they say they will, following their commitments, doing things above and beyond. You know why? Because they're not majoring in the minors. They're not keeping score every minute. Oh, I'm behind, you owe me. Because you lose track of the bigger picture, and you become the smaller person without even intending to. So, and the other thing is, when you're working with people, they'll mold you over time, right? Because, at our collaboration group, we meet every other Thursday on Zoom. People bring their stuff out. Here's what I did this week. Here's what I learned. Well, people are taking notes. If you did it that way and it worked better, I'm going to start doing it that way. Or, hey, I see an issue or a challenge you might want to be aware of. And it's no different if you get really dressed up for something special and you ask somebody next to you, what do you think? Is everything in place? Am I missing something? So just having that sounding board has that benefit. And, doing things by yourself, I guess I had Jason Girardo said, if you do it by yourself, you go fast. If you do it with others, you go far.
Yeah.
Right? And you just got to say, and how much do you want to be all by yourself? How can you scale that? How much time can you trade for money without running out of time before you get enough money? And then how many times can you do something, get paid in the future for it? I'm no pennies with her book. The book keeps selling. She's already done the heavy lifting, and also the idea that if I can do it, you can do it. One last thing with Harvey, he's only been in franchising 11 months, but he is the moderator, facilitator, and the person who brings a show to the public all the time that wants people to be with them. And just like we talked about Bob Berg, once the top franchising person or the top this says, hey, this is a great show, then everybody follows the leader to a point. And then the person doing the show gains more confidence, right? And then decides, in most cases, the reason why people don't do better is they targeted too low instead of too high. What's your thoughts on all this, Kevin?
I think you've got to aim high. Well, like I say, I think you just gradually build. So don't worry about if you don't get big people to start with. I think Gary Vaynerchuk and Russell Brunson both talk about how it doesn't really matter if nobody's listening to start with, because you're no good, right? So it's quite good if no one's listening because you're not very good at it, right? I think hosting a webinar, I mean, you do it very naturally. I'd like to think I'm reasonably good at it, but I've done video for a lot of years, and a lot of people just don't find that very natural, right? It's not a very natural thing to stare in a camera and host other people, etc. Even if they can do it in real life, doing something about doing it on camera is just not as natural. So it does take practice. I was going to say, actually, whether you'd like me to share a couple of tips at the end here.
Sure, please.
It's got some value for how to do this well. There's kind of there's lots of different things you can do, obviously, but there's a few things that I think are quite helpful. But don't worry about it being bad at the start because nobody's listening. I think that's a key thing, and then you just gradually build up. You get better and better. And I'm a big proponent in getting it better next time. And that's the beauty of live streaming versus podcasting. The danger with podcasting is you keep editing. Oh, it's not very good, and maybe we should do it again. And like live streaming, it's just out there, right? You don't get a second bite, and part of the goof. The goof ups, it's and the ums and the ers and all of that stuff. It's that's just part of it, and it's just just being natural. So I think that's the beauty of it. You don't get a second bite of the cherry. You've just got to kind of live with it. But you still can re-edit though and get some value. Or you could even, if you really wanted to, provide the polished version. I don't think there's a lot of value in doing that, but certainly short clips. I think there's a lot of value in that and creating social media content. Because you've now got this long form content. It's perfect for that. And you can run the transcript of this through ChatGPT and create a summary a show summary, which is really valuable for people. And at this point we said this, and this point we said that. There's plenty of systems out there that will do all of that heavy lifting, which before would have been a real pain in the neck. Now it's just really, really easy to do that stuff. You could say, right, create the top tips from this conversation, and ChatGPT or whatever system you like using will just create a little, top 10 tips. You give that to your designer, stick it in Canva, and now you've got an infographic. So there's so much content you can create out of what is basically just a chat, right? It's just super easy.
Well, you make so many great points, and repurposing is a benefit. The thing I like about no editing is that I don't want to edit, right? And if you did an organic video,
I don't like editing. It just takes so long.
But if you did an organic video, self-produced, somebody would say, "Oh, why didn't they edit that out?" And the answer would be either they didn't care, or they weren't aware. Versus, I don't have the time, because everything is a return on time and investment. Sometimes good is good enough. Perfect is too expensive. And if you do 700 shows, every show is less than 0.5% of your total volume of shows.
Yeah, exactly.
If you don't like today, come back Monday. But what's not to like today? Because it's just conversation. It's not pressure. It's not, hey, you got to win the day. You got to score the goal. All you got to do is be somebody who earned enough respect or trust to come back tomorrow and see you again, or to be a fan of yours. And I think people are trying to do too much with too little too fast, get overly frustrated. To your point, you got to learn before you can expect to earn. Just because you want or need, that's great. It's what you deserve that you usually get. And if people are slower to recognize or come to the party, that gives you more time to practice, because you don't want to get on top just to slide down because you didn't do your homework. You didn't understand relationships, how to interact with people, what turns you on, turns people like you on. The difference is who's proactive, who goes first, who's doing more than less. In most cases, people overthink, overworry, and underdo. And that's just a bad formula. And if you trust yourself to trust yourself, or say, hey, I can learn anything if someone will give me the instruction or tell me where to go. If I said to you, Kevin, do these 7 things and you'll have everything you want in the world, you would say, if it's guaranteed, I can do it. Because if I can't, I'll find someone who can teach me, someone who can help me, and it'll get done. Most people don't have a strategy. Most people don't have an endpoint. That's why people wildly connect with anybody like it's a lottery ticket. You know, maybe something from somewhere for some reason will show up, and sometimes it does. Like they say, a broken clock tells the right time twice a day, you know, and anybody can get lucky, but that's not sustainable, scalable, or justifiable. And then another thing is, who do you want in your circle? Who do you want in your life? You know, who do you want to say, hey, next week I'm going to be with this person. I know every time I'm with that person, everything good happens. So yeah, I'd love to hear some tips that you might want to share.
Sure. Well, let me, I don't know when you want to wrap this up, Dom, but that feels like a,
well, we always
how long do you usually do these for, Dom?
We always do an hour, so we got about 13 minutes. Let me just introduce Linda. Linda's been with us for over a year. Just got done with physical therapy and being good with coming late. Then it all, some won't. Just jumping on, let people see you're real, willing to not be perfect. So right, Linda, so appreciated to have you with us. So yeah, please. So we got about.
So now this applies just some of these apply slightly more to podcasting, but it's a very similar thing, right? In terms of how you execute. So these will apply whether it's podcast or a live stream. A couple I've just seen, and one I borrowed from somebody who advised my elder daughter, and my younger daughter's borrowed it. Actually, I'm going to come up with 4 actually. But so the first one is ask your guests for their finish off with what are their top 3 tips. So I'm kind of giving you that anyway, right? And he said, right, because what you can do, if you've got a podcast, you can have the main podcast, and then the next week you can put out the top 3 tips mini episode, and now you just got 2 episodes for the price of 1. You've got a nice little bit of content, and with those top 3 tips, they lend themselves very well for Canvas. Top 3 tips, it says so and so. They lend themselves to short clips. And even if the rest of the whole thing was really waffly, you've got the kind of concise, real high value stuff. Okay. The extra bonus tip I was going to say, I'll put in a second. A question that my younger daughter asks in her podcast, which I love, because one thing I'm always telling them is like one of the great things about this is you can learn. Everybody says you learn from your mistakes. And one of the great things about talking to people who've been and done the thing you want to do is you don't have to do that. You can learn from their mistakes, right? Mm-hmm. That's much more efficient. That's a much better way of life. So she says to all of her guests, it said, what's the biggest kind of educational mistake you feel you made? And what would you have done differently next time? So every time she's racking up this kind of list of wisdom. So and I said to them both, look, even if no one ever listens to your show, this is going to give you loads and loads and loads of benefits, right? So they said, like, if people watch the show, that's a nice bonus. For you, this is building a network, it's learning all the stuff we said, confidence building, etc. So one of her guests said, when I went to university to drama school, I was a bit fussy about the roles I went for, and I ended up with no roles that year. And for a drama student, obviously that's not great because you want to practice. And she said, but I think you just have to kind of learn from experience. And my daughter's thinking, nope, I've just learned from you. You know, that's brilliant. I'm not going to make that mistake. So I think that's a really good question. You know, they always say the quality of the answers you get is down to the quality of the questions you ask, and that was her question. I didn't come up with that, so I love that as a question. So, like, how do you learn from your guests? The last two are around hosting something like this. So when my younger daughter was practicing for a podcast, because she had a slightly bigger guest coming up, it wasn't Kerry Ellis, but it was somebody else that she was starting to get to kind of slightly bigger ones, and she didn't want, and she'd also hadn't done it for a while. She'd had a bit of a hiatus for about 8 months. She sort of run out of steam with it, and she was going to start again. So she wanted to practice. So she did a little practice session with me. And like we all do, but especially I think young people say like a lot, or they say, you know, they get into, oh, everything's fantastic, or everything's, and especially when you're nervous, right? You've got this host, you're feeling, you've got a guest on, you're feeling a bit overawed by the fact they've even come on your show. It's very easy to say, oh, that's fantastic, that's fantastic, that's fantastic, or that's awesome, or that's, and you get fixated on a word, but you don't even realize it because you're nervous, right? And I said to her, well, look, why don't you have a list of phrases just down here, and say, oh, I loved what you said there, or that's amazing, or da 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 da. I said, just to break you out of that kind of going over and over and using the same word over again, and especially things like adjective inflation, where everything's awesome. It's like, well, it's not really awesome, it's just kind of quite good, you know. I'm British, we don't like to do that, you know. It's coming over here, but you know, we like to be a little bit more understated. So that she found really helpful. Just have a little crib sheet of go-to phrases that sort of, when you get stuck, you're not using the same phrase over and over again. So that worked really well for her. The other thing is, and I know I talked to Harvey about this, and I noticed he did this. I was like, oh, that's really cool. I'm pleased pleased that was useful. Is, you know, on a radio show, like a drive time radio show, they will keep coming back to what the topic's about. So let's say, for those of you who've just joined us, I'm here today with Don. We're talking about live streaming, blah, 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 blah. So Don, what do you think about da, 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 da? And I noticed he did that. And if you're doing a show like this, that's half an hour, etc., some people are going to be dipping in and out, and they're not going to necessarily know what went before. So if you can just review for people, A, it's good filler, right? It helps fill the show up. It keeps the energy up. But B, it really helps signpost for people who come in, so they don't feel like they're the outsider, rather than just saying at the start and then nothing is updated as you go through. So like every 15 minutes or whatever, just do a little review and just say, hey, I'm here with so-and-so, or great to see so-and-so here. You know, that little review step. I mean, there's loads of other tips, but those are my top 3/4 little tips for today.
Well, I think they're excellent. I hope everybody took down notes. If not, they can also review this show after it's over, because it automatically posts on YouTube and on LinkedIn. 2 points you made that are so important is the knowledge share component, right? If you're learning 3 tips from Kevin today, and 3 tips from Harvey tomorrow, and 3 tips from Penny the next day, within a week, you've got 21 tips, and everything is a nuance, a facet. It's not mind-blowing or anything else, but just enough to say, yeah, that makes sense. To your other point, when you are doing a show, people mistake this for being in a live audience speaking to them. And let's say you have 100 people in the room. Well, I'd say about 100 people are going to be there at the end of the presentation if they paid for it or they wanted to be there. This is catch as catch can. And they say that about every 8 or 10 minutes, there's a churn. So the people who saw the first 8 minutes will never see the last 8 minutes, and vice versa in the middle. So if you break your show up that every 8 minutes or 10 minutes is a little bit of a reintroduction, like you mentioned, but knowing that you're talking to a fresh audience again. And I think that's so important. The last one that really comes to mind is being able to repurpose what you could have never produced on your own. So in other words, if you get excited about your daughter's activities and successes, you're going to be showing that without knowing that. right? Because it's just going to come out. The energy,
Yeah.
the styles.
I have to be careful because I do go into boring dad mode about those stories very, very readily.
But even just what you did, laughing and having fun, if one wanted to repurpose it and say out of 60 minutes, I had about 6 40, 50-second pieces that were really showcasing who I am, what I want people to see, that if you were to produce it and edit it and script it, it would still come out too professional.
Yeah, totally.
Right? And too polished versus, hey, we're just who we are. Why try to be anything we're not? And if you do, people see it. And, there's a saying, time will either expose you or promote you. So over time, hour after hour after hour, you can't live a lie. It'll start to show up either way. And you have to let time work for you, not you working against time and trying to compress something, force something. Again, it's not sustainable and it doesn't look good. And I think that's the experience of going live is people, you're in their living room. If you can make it like, hey, just stop by, let's sit around, have a little coffee and some pastries for an hour, share this, and I'm on my way. Why wouldn't you? And I think that's the difference, because bottom line, everybody who's on LinkedIn has already made the choice to be on LinkedIn. Everybody who's active on LinkedIn has made the choice to invest time and thought in their activities, posting, commenting, connecting, liking, whatever it is. Why not repurpose that time, redirect that time to something that's going to give you so much more than, to me, posting a comment is like dropping a package off and getting a reply 4 hours later, which is like, thanks for the package. Hope you're doing well. Versus, hey, let's get down to the nitty gritty here. Who wants to go to work? Who wants to go to work together? And what can we do together? Because by getting to know, like, and trust somebody in advance, it's usually a stretch in the beginning. I think I know you. I think I can trust you, but it's going to take getting to do something with you to know it. Where this is, hey, I've seen you for 100 episodes. I kind of know exactly who you are. And plus, familiarity builds reputation, right? When someone sees you over and over and over again, and they think, hey, this is the greatest plumber in the world. And when I need a plumber or I got a friend, this is the person who I'm going to go to.
I'm sure you've heard of the term cognitive bias. It's quite a popular topic at the moment. There's all these different cognitive biases. And I think one of them is just things we see. We have a bias towards things we see a lot. And for me, it's like, I think it's down to, it's the classic advertising, right? It's why advertising works. So any ad rep will know this, obviously. But I think it boils down to, the way I always describe it is if you see a dog and it doesn't bite you, and then you see it again tomorrow and it doesn't bite you, and you see it again tomorrow and it doesn't bite you, you start to kind of trust that it won't bite you and that it's a safe dog to go and stroke. And so it's not that it's any better. It's not that it's any different. You don't have to be better every day. You just have to keep showing up. And that's what I find, and I'm sure Penny will back me up here with the franchising world. And I think this is true in business anywhere, but I think in franchising, because the whole business model is based on relationship, the franchisor has to kind of lead by example rather than, it's not that they're selling individual businesses and they buy the right, but they can run it a little bit how they like up to a point, but within the brand structure. So they have to kind of cajole and do it by relationships. It's a very relationship kind of business model. And so what I found is the people there very friendly, but they take a little while to trust you because they see people come and go in that industry, and they're not going to work with you straight away. They're going to say, is this guy going to be around in the next, month, 6 months, year? Then maybe we'll work with him,
Well, that is an interdependent relationship if done properly. And everybody benefits everybody when they can leverage what's provided in the best way. And then they can understand the results that come through based on that. Because everybody wants to be more successful. You can't work with the idea I'm going to make money off of people as opposed to I can make money with people and for people. Yeah. Right? It shouldn't be a win-lose, because it's hard to wake up every day knowing For you to survive, someone's got to take a hit. And the other thing is the quality of life issue, the future optimism you might have towards now. You found something that could turn the tide, make a difference. Penny says, great point. Don, as always, thank you. And then comes back with, so true, Kevin. Well, we did hit our hour. It always goes so fast because the conversation flows so easily. And it also lends itself to justifying the sophistication of knowledge, of the ability to communicate it to people who really deserve it. And so many shows are just a party, right? It's two people slapping each other on the back, telling each other how great they are, and they just expect the audience just to suffer through it, as opposed to understand the audience is all for being. Dennis is here. Dennis is here almost every day. He's got a heating and air conditioning business in Colorado. Still time to come in and get better. Late than never does increase our life. Thank you, Dennis. And having friends you look forward to seeing makes it so much easier,
Yeah. I think I've learned something really important about you today, though, Don, that I don't know whether I'll ever get to meet you in person. I hope so. But I'm expecting cake when I come to you. You've mentioned cake at least twice in this podcast. So I'm guessing cake plays quite a big part in your life. So,
well, you never know. Even though keto doesn't really invite a lot of cake to it, or the new fad diets, but I think there's something to joy. There's something to just the fun of having fun for that reason. If you do everything right for the right people, either out of gratitude or out of guilt, they're going to take care of you because they want to see it keep coming, right?
Yeah.
And once people know that, they know you for what you are and who you are, that you could never get through on a superficial profile view, on a picture, on a statement, because people start with what you have. They stay for who you are.
Yeah, and look, I think as well, it's not really down to the money. It just makes business more fun, doesn't it? It's when it's based on relationships, right?
Well, what if you could do everything you want to do without money being a consideration, right? How would you do it? And if you did it, you'd make all the money you'd ever want because money follows value, right? If you create value, the marketplace will reward you and allow that to find its value. Like you mentioned, that theater student who decided she was going to get a little particular and what was right and what was wrong. Well, what's right is getting into the game.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what position you play, get on the field and learn from the players, right? If you wanted a top role, well, while you're on the bench, see what makes that person. There's a saying, act as if you are and you'll become,
Yeah. And hang out with the right people, right? And they're hanging out with the right, like, if you want to become a West End star, I think you're far more likely to become a West End star if you're hanging out with West End stars, because it's going to inspire you every week, right?
Well, and that's where the saying, you're the factor of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? If everybody's going bowling, you're a bowler. If everybody's going country western dancing, you're going to be going country western dance. So be particular, especially as relates to disassociation as well as association, right? Some people don't serve any purpose or the value they used to, or some people are dragging you down. And at a certain point, you just got to keep reviewing, reflecting, and making changes. So anyways, Kevin, I thoroughly enjoyed the time today.
I loved our time. Thank you so much for the invite, Don. It's been great. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Linda, Penny, Dennis, and the rest of you. And I know there's probably 6-7 times as many people watching and commenting, and I appreciate you and the future audience we have yet to meet or know, and the value this will continue to ripple. So with that said, thank you very much. Come back Monday. We've got Khan here, who's written his 2nd book. He's been here every other week for about 3 months. He's part of the collaboration group, and it just gets better. So thank you. Thank you, Kevin. And we'll talk.